The action takes place in the town museum. Zhong Yuan, a tour guide, was showing a group of visitors a huge ancient sarcophagus found in 2024. The guide told visitors how the sarcophagus was found and explained that the lid and body of the sarcophagus were a single structure, for which reason it had not been opened since the excavation. Zhong Yuan led the group further towards the excavation exhibit. The red-haired girl was at this moment broadcasting online, camera pointed towards the sarcophagus. June said it was forbidden to take pictures of valuable exhibits, but the girl replied to him that she wasn't taking pictures of the exhibit, she was taking pictures of him. Zhong Yuan stared at the screen incomprehensibly. The girl showed the guy a broadcast on her phone. There were indeed a lot of flattering comments about the guy in the broadcast chat. Zhong Yuan apologized and explained that, in any case, videotaping was forbidden in the museum. He also politely asked the girl not to distract him from his work and started catching up with the tour group. The girl caught up with Zhong Yuan and asked if he knew what was inside the sarcophagus. The guy explained that it was made of a material that wouldn't allow detector beams to pass through to analyze its contents. Therefore, no one knows what's inside, Zhong Yuan summarized. Together with the girl, they looked at the sarcophagus, many times taller than themselves. The girl sighed disappointedly. Suddenly they were announced that due to a planned fire drill, the museum would be closing in 10 minutes. June thought what kind of fire drill, since there was no warning about it, but the girl cheerfully asked if that meant he was exempted because of the drill. The girl offered Zhong Yuan to have dinner together, but the guy took her by the arm and commanded her to run towards the exit. The ground started to go out from under my feet and the ceiling started to collapse. Guy was surprised and assumed that an earthquake had started. Zhong Yuan turned his attention to the cawing of crows outside the window. He noticed that the birds were trying to fly away from the museum. A voice from the loudspeaker announced that a gold-level portal would appear in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. It also called for all units to prepare for battle, eliminate the portal and ensure the safety of the civilians. Zhong Yuan was shocked. He didn't understand what portal we were talking about and worried if everyone was able to get out of the museum. The commander was loudly handing out instructions. He put Zhong Lan in charge and Yu Jiyu as his deputy. The group of armed men ran towards the museum. Zhong Lan, a girl with long silver hair, remembered that her brother was waiting for her at home. She also noticed that the presence of the newcomers would affect the battle with the monsters. She ran at the head of the squad, while her subordinates shouted at her to take her time. Zhong Yuan was very surprised to hear a familiar name outside the window. Holding the girl down, he tried to calm her down and offered to walk to the shelter. Parallel to this, he convinced himself that the names of the girl outside the window and his sister just matched. Zhong Yuan tried to hurry the girl, but her legs gave out and she started to fall. The girl fell to the floor, blood spurting from her mouth and ears. From what he saw, Zhong Yuan's face contorted in horror. A group of militants look at the portal that has opened above the museum. Zhong Lan, clutching her sword in her hands, hurried her comrades. Zhong Yuan tried to make a call, but there was no connection. He scolded himself for sparing the money for a better phone. The sarcophagus was right above him. The guy decided he might as well try using the dead girl's cell phone and picked it up. Zhong Yuan was horrified and covered his mouth with his hand. The guy's face contorted with horror. On the phone's display he saw a black funnel, from which red eyes looked at him. Zhong Lan, along with his 2 battle comrades, rushes towards the portal from which a huge hand appeared. The subordinate suspected that there was some kind of mistake and the portal might be a level higher than stated, but Zhong Lan didn't stop that and she commanded her to be on guard. Jun Lan slashed the sword at the hand that came out of the portal. The girl noticed that 3 of the supports were broken and a hole would soon form in that spot. Zhong Lan concluded that the danger level was catastrophic and gathered all the strength she had to attack. The girl struck a blow on her arm, putting all her strength into it. Her subordinate was astonished by what she saw and assumed that Zhong Lan was able to absorb the power of the 5 crystals. Meanwhile, the part of the squad that remained further from the epicenter realized that they had been misinformed and the portal was more dangerous than they thought. The man commanding the operation gave the command to get ready and be on guard, as the portal could draw them in. Zhong Lan replied that handling it would be very difficult. The commander, perplexed, interrogated what she meant. The girl, tirelessly wielding her sword, suggested that she was now fighting illusions and that in order to win, she needed to find the one who created them. Zhong Yuan stared in horror at the red eyes behind his back reflected in the cell phone screen. Suddenly a huge demonic hand appeared over the guy. He starts to run, stumbles over the girl's corpse and realizes that this is the end. A demonic hand strikes the sarcophagus and it falls. Zhong Yuan was crushed by the sarcophagus, with only his hand and the phone he was trying to call his sister from outside. The sarcophagus began to burn around the edges. Zhong Yuan and his clothes turned completely white, he was surrounded by a whirlwind of flames, yet his consciousness did not leave him. Guy assumed that he was dead. Suddenly the boy heard the conversations of the squad members, among which he heard the name and voice of his sister, his face contorted with fear. Judging from the negotiations, Zhong Lan refused to obey the order and retreat, wanting to kill the monster, but her brother couldn't believe his ears and didn't understand how she could be here. The image of his sister appeared before his eyes, one of the best students in the class, a gentle and well-mannered girl, just the way he knew her and could not believe that she was at the center of the accident. Zhong Yuan convinced himself that he was just dreaming, he didn't understand why he couldn't see anything and tried to break through the veil with his hands. He screamed, begging to be allowed to see his sister. Suddenly, the image of Jun Lan appears in front of his eyes, the guy recoiled in surprise. The sister, shouting curses, brought her sword above her head. With a wide swing, Zhong Lan struck her brother, blood spurted out of his mouth. The demon began to extend its paws towards Jun Lan. But she was able to repel the attack. The girl was horrified to realize that the monster had begun to materialize and there was no turning back. The protective barrier that Zhong Lan used to restrain the monster split into small pieces. The man also grudgingly noted that the demon had incarnated into a physical shell and they had very little time left, no more than 3 minutes. It was worth taking care of Zhong Lan, but the other guy assured that nothing would happen to her. Zhong Yuan inside the monster begged his sister to stop after he saw her protective field split. But she didn't hear her brother's pleas and attacked. Her brother couldn't find his place and kept shouting for Zhong Lan to stop advancing, because it could lead to her death. The demon fended off all attacks and grabbed the girl with its tenacious paws while she was not expecting the attack. And he threw Zhong Lan away with an incredible force that the girl could not reflect. Ta bullet flew down from such a great height and raised a huge cloud of dust upon landing. Then Zhong Yuan sobbed and finally realized that his sister could not hear his words. In desperation, he cried out to Zhong Lan, begging her not to die. He tried to get out of this creature and realized the reason why his sister was so rarely at home, covering up for outings. Zhong Yuan thought that if he had known about it earlier, he would have done something about it. Zhong Yuan sobbed and blamed himself for not being interested in what was going on at her school. After all, Zhong Lan had good grades. Then he got to the edge of space and mentally reached out to his sister, asking her to stop and assuring her that he would save her. A snippet of the phrase still reached Zhong Lan, who was a considerable distance away from her brother. But this time she couldn't give up, for if she retreated, the entire city would turn to dust from the destruction the demon would bring. Zhong Lan determinedly set up, here is also their home. If she retreated, who will defend this place, who will protect her brother but herself? She needed to hold out a little longer and then she'd be able to figure something out. Zhong Lan swung around and wished death on the monster that had Zhong Yuan inside of it. Her mind was spinning with thoughts of her duty to protect her brother and their home by crushing the demon that had come to destroy everything. Zhonglan flew upwards, getting closer and closer to the monster to give it a decisive blow. But Zhong Yuan was not satisfied with this arrangement and begged his sister to escape as quickly as possible. Meanwhile he was being consumed by an unknown flame. Zhong Yuan was unconscious, but one blink of an eye, he opened his eyes, which were full of surprise and didn't understand what was going on. He was lying in a hospital bed and determined by the smell of medicine that he had found himself in a hospital. Zhong Yuan looked at the bedside monitor and saw that his blood pressure and heartbeat were at 0. From this, he concluded that the machine was broken. After all, that one was alive. Suddenly a conversation came from the corridor and Zhong Yuan listened. The voice was saying something to his sister, but he missed much of it and only heard the man advising her to heed his words so that her brother wouldn't be a vegetable until he died. Zhong Yuan realized that his sister was behind the wall and abruptly jumped up from his bunk, running towards the exit of the room. Standing outside the door was indeed Jun Lan with wet eyes. She was glad that her brother had finally woken up. The girl cried with joy and exclaimed that she was happy to see Zhong Yuan alive and well. She hugged her brother tightly, for just now the doctor had told her that Zhong Yuan would be a vegetable for a long time yet. But Zhong Yuan assured his sister that he was fine. He puzzledly noticed that Zhong Lan now looked like a junior high school girl. But this did not calm the girl, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. She did not believe her brother. After all, he was hit by a car, and how can you feel good about yourself? Zhong Yuan couldn't understand what kind of machine Zhong Lan was talking about, because not long ago, he was inside a demon and his sister was fighting that one. But he looked at the screen. Turns out he was back in 2042, 4 years back to when he was in the car accident. Zhong Yuan took the silver lining from what had happened, because now he would be able to take care of Lan Lan and things would work out differently for them. Then he stroked her cheek to comfort her. Lin Dongliang, the commander of the Night Hawks, came up to them and introduced himself. After the man went on to say that the doctor had said that the probability of brain death was very high, but Zhong Yuan had not only survived but was in good health. But Zhong Yuan didn't want to communicate with this man and hit him with the door on the hand that the man held out to him. This gesture confused Lin Dongliang. After all, he just wanted to get acquainted. Zhong Yuan walked into the room with his sister and said that you can't mess with Lin Dongliang. Zhong Lan objected. She thought he was a good person who wanted to help her. In the past, when the portal manifested, Zhong Yuan saw him for the first time. The latter was very confused. Yuan would never have thought that Lin Dongliang's team had laid eyes on his sister 4 years ago. Zhong Yuan cautioned his sister, because free cheese is only in a mousetrap and Dongliang would not help just like that. Zhong Lan said that because of her talent, he hoped that she would go to study with him to contribute to society. Zhong Yuan realized that this strange type didn't seem to have time to tell his sister everything in detail. He thought that until college, she'd better not get involved in this, and she noticed that her brother's hands were very cold and suggested calling a doctor. Zhong Yuan pondered if there was a way to escape danger without fighting. After all, when there was a threat, Zhong Lan simply wouldn't be able to take care of himself. His sister was ready to do battle with the green monster and his brother was helping her from the rear. The best way to keep yourself safe is to fight. Zhong Yuan asked Zhong Lan to help him with the discharge. While he was going to thank Mr. Lin in the meantime, Ta agreed to help her brother. After all, she was almost done with everything. The brother opened the ward doors, and right behind them stood Lin Dongliang. As soon as he took a step, he saw Dongliang right at the door. The one said that he didn't need thanks and wanted to talk. Zhong Yuan hoped that the man hadn't overheard him and Lan Lan talking, but everything said otherwise. They moved further away so that they could talk without being overheard. Yuan stated that he wanted to lure Zhong Lan to join his team and the academy he had invited her to was the perfect place to do so. Lin Dongliang was amazed at his insight. Then brother Zhong Lan said that he knows about the existence of portals, monsters, and that his sister is a genius. He said that Dong Liang is a hypocrite, disguised as wanting to benefit society, trying to kidnap his sister. Lin Dong Liang shouted for the guy not to try to make him look like a villain. After all, he was looking for talents that would save humanity. Then Zhong Yuan asked if it was for the sake of humanity that he was eavesdropping on their conversation and asked him to stay away. But Dong Liang wasn't going to beat around the bush and told her that Zhonglan's talent could really save humanity, and he hoped the guy would tell her everything and let her take part in saving the world. Zhong Yuan gave permission to enter the academy. This surprised Dong Liang, because just now he had told him to stay away. Then the guy asked if these things were incompatible and warned that he had certain conditions. Lin Dong Liang started to ask how much money he wanted for the permit, but Zhong Yuan waved it away. It wasn't that simple, he didn't need money. The guy said he wanted to accompany his sister to the academy. No matter what she would study or what tasks she would perform, he would be there for her. Zhong Yuan started to leave and lastly said that this was his only condition. He advised to think it over well and assured that Lon Lon only obeyed him, and without his consent, it was useless to try to lure her. Lin Dong Liang pondered. After all, there would be no problem with enrollment, so how could he enroll an ordinary person into the warrior class? Something had to be done. Without his consent, he would miss out on Zhonglan's talent. The brother and sister walked out of the hospital. Jun Lan wondered if her brother was definitely fine. She noticed that his body was now somehow weak and cold. Zhong Yuan hurriedly calmed her down and said that because of the treatment, his arms are all bruised from the injections, which is why he is so weak and cold. He suggested that they cook something delicious together at home. The girl got excited and said she wanted pork ribs in sweet and sour sauce and pork feet. Zhong Yuan looked closely at his bruises. The boy was horrified to discover that it wasn't a bruise at all, but a cadaverous stain. The action takes place at the home of Zhong Yuan and Zhong Lan. The table is set with a variety of main dishes as well as desserts. Zhong Lan eats with great appetite and praises his brother's culinary skills. Zhong Yuan placed the chopsticks on the table, to which Zhong Lan was surprised. The sister noticed that the brother had no appetite at all after the hospital and his skin was pale. She suggested that he visit the hospital again. However, Zhong Yuan assured his sister that lack of appetite after a coma was completely normal. The guy went into the kitchen and started washing dishes. While washing dishes, Zhong Yuan thought about how he didn't actually need food and water, as well as sleep and hygiene at all. To top it all off, he pondered another frightening discovery. Zhong Yuan remembered coming to the conclusion that he really did have a cadaverous stain on his arm. At first he made the assumption that the hospital's equipment had broken, but when he measured his blood pressure at home, he found that he had no pulse. He also failed to take his own temperature. From all of this the guy concluded that he was indeed dead. The thought made him smile nervously. Zhong Yuan assumed that the only explanation for what was happening was magic, which incredibly brought him back in time 4 years ago. He pictured himself falling into an abyss. However, the guy still could not understand how such a thing was even possible. Imagination painted a picture of him lying in a hospital bed. The only thing that reassured him was that cadaver stains appeared slowly, which meant his secret wouldn't come out until he was readmitted to the hospital. Zhong Yuan received a phone call. Lin Dong Liang was on the other end of the line. He told the boy and his sister to come to the academy after the vacation was over. Zhong Yuan was surprised that the man agreed to his condition so easily, but the man irritably remarked that he had a hard time agreeing to fulfill it. Lin Dong Liang said that he needed his sister's talents. In his hands, he held a rather large red crystal. The man also added that the boy would not be given any special treatment and that he would definitely be expelled for truancy and poor academic performance. To such terms, Zhong Yuan confidently agreed. Brother and sister approached the academy. Zhong Lan ran ahead of her brother. She was amazed by its beauty and majesty. They approached the statue standing in front of the academy. Jun Lan was surprised, because usually there was a monument of Confucius in front of educational institutions. Brother explained to her that this statue was dedicated to the creator of the ability improvement system, who was also the strongest person in the world. From the back, a guy came up to them. He called himself Sei Han, the person in charge of admissions to the special classes. He was also their new classmate. The guy abruptly threw a bag to Zhong Yuan. The guy barely reacted. As if not noticing her brother, Sei Han walked over to Junlan and handed her a bag with a smile. He explained that it contained school supplies and a watch, which he asked her to wear, and offered to walk her to her dormitory. Still not paying attention to Zhong Yuan, the guy told him that there was a sports field and an art gallery on the academy grounds, which was where he had invited Zhong Lan to go. Zhong Yuan took Sei Han by the shoulder. He pulled the boy away from his sister and told him they could handle it from here. The brother and sister walked on, leaving their classmate behind. Junlan put on her watch and asked her brother to try on his as well. Sei Han unhappily clicked his tongue as he looked at them. When Zhong Yuan put on the watch, it greeted its new owner. They also said that military training camp would begin at 1 p.m., so we should finish decorating and gather in front of the athletic field. On Sei Han's face, he could not understand what kind of training camp he was talking about. One of the applicants to the academy swore and threw the watch to the ground in an attempt to smash it so that it would stop beeping. Another guy, sobbing, complained that he was about to have a nervous breakdown. Zhong Yuan assumed that the other freshmen's watches were broken. His sister, on the other hand, said that she understood the guys trying to break their watches, because their sound and vibration got on their nerves. Junlan asked her brother why his watch stopped making that annoying sound. He said he just answered, "Got it," and asked her the same question. Junlan was embarrassed and covered her mouth with her hand. Then recited her request to the clock, folding her hands as if in prayer. After that, according to Zhonglan, the beeping of the clock stopped. Zhong Yuan was very surprised by this, because he assumed that the clock only reacted to keywords. Also, he thought that the clock was being controlled by some pervert. Someone loudly called out for all the freshmen to gather. It happened so suddenly that it startled Zhonglan. The first-year students lined up in rows. One of them standing next to Zhong Yuan was relieved that the clock had stopped jingling. Zhong Yuan noticed that this freshman was at least 40 years old, from which he concluded that potential was more important than age here. At this moment, a certain woman in front of the freshman loudly ordered everyone to shut up. The woman said her name was Lu Wen and that she was the freshman's supervisor, and that they could contact her with any questions, but only after taking the test. She also said that Zhong Lan was exempted from the test due to age. The others have to sign some sort of paperwork. A non-matriculated freshman, after reading the text of the contract, was outraged that they were being forced to sign something like this. He queried what the clause meant about the dangers of military training and the lack of responsibility on the part of the academy for accidents. To this, Lu Wen sternly replied that if anyone present was not going to sign the document, they could go to the dean's office and expel themselves. However, she pointed out to the freshmen that after the training, they would become much stronger and be able to absorb crystals more successfully. Upon hearing this, the man immediately began to sign the contract. Zhong Yuan was surprised that a classmate was willing to sacrifice his life for the opportunity to become stronger. While Zhong Yuan was signing the document, he thought about the fact that these crystals seemed to be needed to enhance abilities, but most people's absorption rate was too low. He further thought that since he was already dead, he would not be in any danger of signing the document, and was also relieved that his sister had been released. However, he doubted if he could absorb the crystal. At this moment, a man with dark glasses was watching Zhong Yuan. He was assessing the guy and noticed that he was the only one who signed the document without a second thought and the only one who answered "received." The students began to load into the transportation. When the cars were almost ready to leave, Zhong Yuan was called over by a man in dark glasses. Zhong Yuan asked what he wanted. The man told the guy to keep an eye on his watch and told him about the possibility of calling for help through it as a reward for reacting correctly to the watch's signal. Suddenly, Zhong Yuan grabbed the man's hand and, boiling over, asked why his sister's watch had also turned off. He replied that he liked her voice and that he couldn't refuse her. The transport began to drive away, Zhong Yuan shouting curses and threats to the man as he moved away. The man, looking after him, thought the boy was so grateful to him that he couldn't take his eyes off him. Upon arriving at the site, the students once again organized themselves into lines. Lu Wen, addressing the students, said that they all had potential, however, until they absorbed the crystal, they were ordinary people and that this training should show them how fragile human life was. She began to explain that there was a boundary with several energy points at this location and that the mechanism was like copying space based on the actual terrain. According to her, everything that happens in such a space has no effect on the real world and that the government is using this technology to grow crystals. She then announced that the students' task was to survive in this place for 3 days and that they could use the supplies in the backpacks in front of them. Some of the students were surprised that they were being sent on such a test, even though they were ordinary people for now. She said that they might not be able to enter the crystal cultivation area. The main thing was to survive and show their potential. Zhong Yuan thought that this was his chance to get such a crystal. Lu Wen also revealed that the watch can be used to signal for help and scare off low-level enemies, but this consumes energy, which the watch has exactly 3 days worth of. Pointing to the portal that opened, the woman called for the students to walk through it if they were ready. When the students were already moving towards the portal, Lu Wen reminded them that students should help each other, and those who were found to have harmed fellow students would be expelled and sent to the tribunal. Zhong Yuan found the woman's last words intimidating, yet he enthusiastically went to the portal. The freshman mentor explained that it is much safer to fight as a team and reminded them that a team should consist of no more than 6 people. The freshmen divided into teams among themselves. Zhong Yuan asked to be on someone's team, but was turned down, citing that they had run out of spots. Some girl asked if Zhong Yuan had found a team and invited him to join her team since there were only 4 of them. But the other 3 members of the team didn't like it and called the girl named Huang Xiaoyan, so that she wouldn't be delayed. One of Xiaoyan's team members said that they had no seats. This was a brazen lie. After all, there were only 4 of them, but Zhong Yuan wasn't going to ask for directions. This was not a good thing, as it would have been much easier to survive as a team. Huang Xiaoyan awkwardly smiled and apologized to the guy. She couldn't go against the entire group for a stranger. Zhong Yuan noticed some man with a backpack watching him from behind the bushes. The man was carefully observing Zhong Yuan's actions. Zhong Yuan suddenly turned off the road and disappeared behind the trees and the man could no longer watch him. Then he thought that the scariest thing on the planet was man. This really pissed off the entire group that was surreptitiously following Zhong Yuan from behind the bushes. One of those following the guy told Wang Meng, who was standing on a rock, that Zhong Yuan had turned off the path and asked if he had noticed them. From the sheet he was given, he learned a lot of new things. The species that grew in this place is called snow snake. It takes the temperature into account when choosing a place to hunt. The attack power is medium. Zhong Yuan read the properties of the crystal. Its quality is very high, as many as 4 skills: super sense of smell, freezing, regeneration, death saving. He was interested in the last ability, but he didn't want her to use it with me. In any case, the first thing to do was to find the snow snake. Zhong Yuan rushed out to look for it. He began to run through the forest, but this did not last long, for ice appeared under his feet. Zhong Yuan stopped in amazement. After all, it wasn't him who found the snow snake, but it found him. The entire ground around Zhong Yuan was covered in ice and he saw something amazing. On the tree branch above him, 2 snow snakes slowly crawled. The snow snakes had wrapped their bodies around the entire branch and were now about to fight each other. Zhong Yuan only watched the scene in amazement. Zhong Yuan pulled out his sword so that in case of emergency, he could fight off the snakes that had unexpectedly caught up with him. Another one crawled up to the two snow snakes and they began to coil around each other. The three snakes coiled and began to merge into one. Behind Zhong Yuan's back was now a huge, thick snake. From its weight, it fell off the branch. Zhong Yuan swung the tip of his sword at the huge snake and was ready to rush to attack. But the snake did not attack the lad. This surprised him, for wild animals are not docile. It suddenly dawned on him, a snake hunts when it feels warm, so now he was no different than a tree to it. He was dead, and the dead have no body temperature. This gruesome fact made it easier for him to survive, for now there was no need to fight the snake. Zhong Yuan, without thinking long, chopped off the head of the huge snake with one precise strike. Blood was oozing from the snake's body, and the head lay separate from everything else. The guy couldn't believe it was that simple, and for good reason. Snake had activated his skill and was now being reborn. Zhong Yuan resolutely rushed to attack. Since the snake doesn't die with one strike, he would try to strike a couple more. A crystal glittered at the boy's hand. Zhong Yuan couldn't figure out Shui Jing, whether it was Shui Jing. If someone came out, it was only by dying. About his dead state, the instructor didn't need to know about his dead state until he absorbed the crystal. Lon Lon is a genius, but his skill is probably not that bad either, so he was going to check it out. An inscription appeared in front of him, asking if Zhong Yuan wanted to absorb him. After absorbing him, one could obtain the following abilities: super perception, ice, regeneration, immunity to death. The guy was surprised by such a text prompt, but he decided to give it a try. He couldn't die again anyway. Zhong Yuan mentally thought about absorption and something started to happen to him. The blue vortex lifted him up and enveloped him with the power of a snow snake crystal. All four abilities were successfully absorbed by him. Was he really lucky despite being left without a team? A group of freshmen were standing outside a wooden cabin actively discussing something related to their future plans. One guy narrated that even a strong person in China could only get 3% successful crystal absorption. The girl next to him remarked that this probability was comparable to getting a SSR rank skill. With such a probability, success was almost impossible. The other guy told them to forget it and instead of talking let them follow the initial plan of finding a couple crystals and returning to the instructor with them. Wang Meng and his team were approaching the guys who were discussing the way forward. One of Wang Meng's guys told the one that they had broken their watches and the only usable ones were those freshmen. He asked what they would do next. Wang Meng replied that what they managed to take away is their stuff. A guy from Wang Meng's team offered to ask for a watch from a bespectacled man from a company nearby. Wang Meng gave the order to advance. The academy employee was observing the situation in the area with a very thoughtful face. The boy scared annoyingly, for he had implied that the watch should be used. He stared annoyingly at the monitor and wondered how the man could call himself a warrior. The academy worker pondered how the man dared to go up into the mountains without the necessary equipment, eyeing the map that marked all the people in the trial area. The freshman curator asked the guy if her charges were fighting amongst themselves. The guy replied that so far they weren't. The girl offered to go to their aid beforehand so that no one would get hurt in the infighting and there would be fewer casualties. The curator's partner grinned evilly. He felt there was no need to interfere right now. The guy leaned back, folded his hands behind his head and jokingly said that the death of a couple of morons would puzzle the court-martial, and then added that let the freshmen try to fend for themselves. A leaf on the tree was covered in ice. Zhong Yuan, after trying out the ability, realized that it could indeed freeze things for 10 seconds. He concluded that it could help in a critical situation. Next he tried out the heat vision skill. This was how he could sense living things within a 10-meter radius. Zhong Yuan thought that compared to these abilities, immunity from death wasn't that good. He also realized that even though his body temperature had not returned, the cadaverous stains were gone and the need for glasses was no longer necessary. Zhong Yuan concluded that he could get a couple more crystals, and at the same time, he would get a chance to test a hunch. He kicked the tree and snakes sprang from it. The boy struck at the falling snake. His guess was correct. If you cut off the snake's head, it would be unable to regenerate. Another crystal emerged from its remains. Interface offered Zhong Yuan to absorb the crystals he received. He agreed. His perception skill had increased to level 3 and his freeze skill had increased to level 2. Zhong Yuan concluded that skills could be pumped with similar crystals and that one crystal guaranteed one level of pumping. However, he had a question about what would happen after the yellow level. The guy decided to kill a few more snakes and see what would happen. Meanwhile, the group following Zhong Yuan hesitated whether to continue the pursuit. However, their leader said they had nothing to fear. One member of the group expressed concern that they would not be able to find their target. Another member of the group noticed the decapitated corpse of a snake and pointed it out to the others. The group members wondered how Zhong Yuan managed to kill the snow snake. The leader assumed that he had taken advantage of the clock. A member of the group discovered the remains of 3 more snakes. The leader assumed that Zhong Yuan was able to absorb the crystal or was originally prepared for the ordeal. The snake guy who had found the snake suggested leaving Zhong Yuan alone, but the leader wasn't going to back down. He decided that since Zhong Yuan had become stronger, he should eliminate him. Zhong Yuan kicked the wood with his foot. A large number of snakes sprinkled from the tree. Suddenly, Zhong Yuan felt someone approaching. Using the heat detection skill, he realized that there were 5 people surrounding him. He assumed they were the same people who were following him. The leader of the group called out to Zhong Yuan and offered to surrender. In his hand he clutched a long knife. He said that if Zhong Yuan didn't obey, he would die. The 5 men surrounding Zhong Yuan began to shorten the distance. There were many snakes lying around, however, they did not move. Zhong Yuan looked around. He made a legitimate conclusion that these people were going to rob him. The guy spread his hands apart and said he didn't have any crystals. The leader of the robbers accused Zhong Yuan of lying, pointing out the large number of dead snakes around. Zhong Yuan confirmed that the snakes were dead. However, he knew that they were actually just stunned. The guy decided to teach the robbers a lesson to stop such actions on the route and that his sister in the future nothing threatened. Zhong Yuan said that he really didn't have any crystals. To prove the truth of his words, he poured out the contents of his backpack of supplies in front of the robbers. However, this did not convince the robber leader. He said that they had seen 4 dead snakes on the way here, which meant that Zhong Yuan must have the crystals. To this the guy replied with a frustrated face that he tried to absorb them, but when he tried to do so they just disappeared. The leader of the robbers pointed a knife at Zhong Yuan and started accusing him of being stupid. He said that if the takeover procedure was so simple, literally anyone could get into the special class. Zhong Yuan thought about the fact that he should try to avoid getting injured. The leader of the robbers decided that the guy wasn't going to resist, so he could just chase him away and take the crystals from the snakes that were lying around. He made his condition: Zhong Yuan should give them his watch and get out of here. Zhong Yuan agreed and started to take off his watch. After that, he threw them directly onto the ground swarming with snakes. After fulfilling the demand, Zhong Yuan asked if he could be free. However, one of the robbers demanded that the guy give them his knife as well. The other robber disagreed. After all, they had already taken everything else from Zhong Yuan, but the leader supported the suggestion of taking the knife, fearing that the guy would dare to attack with it. To this, Zhong Yuan replied that of everyone present, he was the only one who wanted conflict and assured that he had no plans to attack anyone. The robber who had interceded for Zhong Yuan suggested that he return to the safe zone. the leader confirmed that there was nothing dangerous on the way there and that the guy could wait there for 3 days, as there was food and water there, and the task would still be completed. As they left, Zhong Yuan told the robbers that they had better abandon the idea of trying to pursue them. After that the guy stepped on one of the snakes, Tu sharply regained consciousness and stirred. All the snakes woke up and quickly crawled towards the group of robbers that encircled Zhong Yuan's watch. The leader of the robbers reached for his watch. One of the robbers praised him for being able to pull it off so successfully, while the other was worried that Zhong Yuan might come back when he found out that they had lied about the food and water. Meng, the leader of the robbers, didn't care, because he didn't have any weapons, so he couldn't do anything to them. He looked at the battery charge and saw that the charge on them was almost full. He realized that Zhong Yuan didn't use the watch to suppress snakes. The robbers looked around and realized they were trapped, for the snakes surrounded them on all sides. Meng rushed out in a panic and urged everyone else to do the same. The robbers shouted loudly for help, and even the birds that were sitting in the trees nearby scattered in different directions. Zhong Yuan walked forward confidently, not paying any attention to the shouts, thinking that the robbers shouldn't have messed with him. The 2 freshmen set off and they almost came to the snake's nest. Along the way, they stumbled upon Zhong Yuan, to which they were very surprised. Huang Xiaoyan ran up to the guy and asked him how he got here, to which Zhong Yuan said that he was robbed. Xiaoyan worriedly asked the one if he was injured. Zhong Yuan assured the girl that he was fine. Zhong Yuan told them that after they tried to rob him, went to kill the monsters, they must have already finished. The guy from Huang Xiaoyan's team grabbed that one by the arm and said that they should hurry up before they killed everyone, but the girl objected. They couldn't just abandon Zhong Yuan like that. The boys get annoyingly, Zhong Yuan would only distract them. The freshman said hello to Zhong Yuan and began to talk about their team. Zhong Yuan asked the one not to bother. He knew the one didn't want him to join. He knew that if he didn't eat and drink, it would arouse suspicion, so he needed to make sure not to slip up, and it wasn't very convenient to kill monsters without a knife. Zhong Yuan stated to them that he would go with them to retrieve the backpack and then immediately leave afterward. The boys came to a clearing and saw all the people in it immobilized by hungry snow snakes. One, shrouded head to toe in snakes, of the defeated crew begged those for help. But the snakes let him finish speaking and he fell to the ground from the snow reptile's many bites. Huang Xiaoyan covered her mouth in amazement at the sight, while her partner couldn't understand where there were so many snakes coming from. Almost all of Wang Meng's team was dead, except for Wang Meng himself, who had fought back so far. Huang Xiaoyan along with her partner rushed away from this clearing. In the process she asked why Zhong Yuan wasn't running, but her partner impatiently dragged her further. Zhong Yuan grabbed his knife from the floor and wondered if they were so frightened by a bunch of snakes, looking at the fleeing people in their wake. Zhong Yuan resolutely walked with his knife towards the snakes that were still biting Wang Meng's body. He jokingly said that he thought no one would mind if he killed them. There was no one to object anymore. With one super-fast strike, he pierced through all the snakes that were on the breathless body. When he had collected all the stones from the snakes' bodies, Zhong Yuan proceeded to the absorption stage to improve his abilities. After that, a clue appeared in front of him. Super perception increased to green level 2, ice, green level 3, regeneration, yellow level 3, immunity to death could not be improved. Zhong Yuan felt a surge of strength from the improvement. Zhong Yuan thought about the fact that 10 crystals were now needed to improve a level from yellow to green, so, further improvement would follow the same pattern. The likelihood of a single crystal skill was confirmed. He pumped the freeze to green level 3, but the regeneration remained yellow. Apparently, some force is preventing him from improving it. Surely the others think that a mere human cannot absorb the crystal. Mere humans just have crystals vaporize after a failed absorption. He wondered if everyone could see the same clues as him. Zhong Yuan decided to try out his new abilities and applied the freeze to all the surviving snakes that 2 more bodies had. The guy clearly understood that he shouldn't give away the amount of crystals he had absorbed, but he was uneasy about the dead students. The freshman curator remarked that this was nothing new. In situations like this it is customary to summon the instructor with a watch and all the trouble falls on that one's shoulders. At that moment the device beeped. The curator asked her partner if any of the guys who had sent the signal could help. In response, the partner said they were in no danger, they didn't know they were being monitored, and then he suggested we make a little show of it. The curator's partner asked Huang Xiaoyan and the guy from her team if this was the murder scene. They answered in the affirmative. An academy employee was examining the crime scene. He found that most of the wounds were snake bites, but there was also 1 stab wound, 3 watches, 1 had a dead battery. The freshman mentor's partner made a point of judging the crime scene. He continued to replay the events on the battlefield based on the evidence, aided by the computer. In the past, Wang Meng's team used sound wave, but it could only scare away the snow snakes. All of Meng's guys were in a panic, they didn't know what to do. Then Wang Meng ordered them to turn on the watches they had taken away from the students. But the team wasn't going to wait on the spot for help and they ran away, abandoning their leader. The horde of snakes was rapidly overtaking the fugitives who were trying to avoid death at all costs. One guy from Wang Meng's team asked why these snakes are so fast. To this Wang Meng said, but didn't finish, that it doesn't matter if you run slower than the snake. Wang Meng put a knife in the back of one of his buddies to save his own skin, because the snakes would swarm onto this guy's body first. Running away, Wang Meng finished his phrase, the main thing is that I should run faster than her, and it worked. Some of the snakes switched to the guy. The curator's partner realized that Zhong Yuan had led them directly to the snake nest and indirectly killed them with those very snakes. He kept noticing new details, for if he looked around there were at least 30 snakes. But something didn't add up in his calculations. Why didn't they attack Zhong Yuan himself? This detail interested him. After all, he hadn't noticed him using anything. The guys watched the thoughtful expression on the academy employee's face and decided to ask what had happened. He said that he had found out what was wrong and the military training continued. The curator's partner rather remarked that Zhong Yuan had enough cunning, courage and cold calculation. This he liked a lot about this interesting guy. He made a promise to himself that if Zhong Yuan returned alive, he would settle this matter for him. The action took place in the academy cafeteria. Lin Dongliang asked Zhong Lan, who was having lunch, how her first day at the academy went. Lan quite said that the campus is beautiful, the dormitory is huge, the teachers are kind, and eating the pudding she added that the food in the canteen is delicious and she likes everything. Lin Dongliang held out a phone to the girl and said that this phone had a satellite function. She would be able to keep in touch with it no matter where she was. But Zhong Lan capriciously turned away and refused, reasoning that her brother had told her not to take anything from the hands of strangers. This reaction was a surprise to Dongliang. Lin Dongliang agreed that her brother was right, but added that it was not a gift, but a loan, so when she earned money for a new one, she would return it to him and buy a new one for herself. Zhong Lan happily grabbed the phone from the table and said that in such a case, it was okay to not be modest. Lin Dongliang asked her where her brother was now and why he wasn't having lunch with her. Lan was cautiously and anxiously told that Zhong Yuan was currently at a military training camp. This answer put Lin Dongliang in a stupor. Who would think of sending an ordinary person to a military training camp? What is this academy thinking? After all, if something happened to him, Zhong Lan would hate him to death. Lin Dongliang jumped up from the table and told Lan that he had one call to make. Zhong Lan asked lastly if military training was dangerous and asked for her brother's return soon. But Lin Dongliang hurriedly reassured her and said that it wasn't dangerous at all and Zhong Yuan would be back soon, but mentally hoped that he was fine. The curator was sitting at a table with some man. He asked her if the guy with glasses had come with her. The girl asked him not to call her partner that. The freshman curator went on to say that he was here to observe the military training camp, not to shine his face. Finally, a guy in uniform approached them. The guy said hello and introduced himself as Fong Mo from Team Fengluan. He explained that he had come here for a mission and asked if the commander was here. The curator's face changed, for this was the guy that ranked 68th on the list. He was here for a mission, but why wasn't she notified of the postponement of the military exercise? The girl introduced herself as Lu Wen. She was an instructor at the academy and was in charge of military training. Fong Mo narrated that his mission was to rescue student Zhong Yuan. He asked if they knew his location. Fong Mo replied that based on the latest information, Zhong Yuan headed to the safe zone but never returned. After receiving the information, the man immediately went to look for him. Lu Wen was surprised. After all, the military training was going smoothly. The man opposite on the other hand said that he knew something about Fong Mo. He said that Fong Mo's brother was sick and could only be cured by the snow snake crystal. That was the reason why he had transferred here. In addition, he was suffering from a severe form of facial blindness. Fong Mo navigated the map on his phone and headed towards the snow snake's lair. He thought that as long as the drill was being watched, everything would be fine. Looking at the map, he pondered that as he moved further down the road, he would definitely come to the snake lair. Fong Mo came across the shredded and refreshed corpse of a snow snake. He was surprised that one of the freshmen would wield a knife like this. Behind the bushes, Fong Mo noticed Zhong Yuan, who was swinging his knife at this moment. Zhong Yuan vigorously worked the huge cleaver. A few nicks had already appeared on its blade. Fong Mo was very surprised at such a picture. He didn't understand how such an excellent weapon like the academy knife could be handled so carelessly. Fong Mo approached Zhong Yuan from the back and told him that if a knife could, he would have already cried from such treatment. Zhong Yuan was surprised by the man's appearance and started asking him questions: who he was, what he was doing here, and why he cared what he was doing with the knife. Such a thing made Fong Mo aghast, thinking that any other person in such a situation would be ashamed and leave. Zhong Yuan on the other hand pressed further. He said that the academy had only given him this knife and that if the man was not satisfied with something, he could give him something else. To this, Fong Mo gave the guy a brand new knife. However, he put a condition. Zhong Yuan admiringly looked at his new acquisition. The man's condition was that he could keep the snake that Zhong Yuan had gutted, but the rest of the snakes would go to Fong Mo. Zhong Yuan was very surprised and asked if Fong Mo was ashamed of taking the loot from the freshman. The man replied that this wasn't Zhong Yuan's territory and that the rule of first up is first down didn't work here. Fong Mo threw his spear at the snake sitting in the tree with great strength and speed. The man hit the snake exactly in the head, nailing it to the tree. After that, Fong Mo told Zhong Yuan that the snakes should go to the strongest. A blue glow came from the place where the spear hit. Zhong Yuan watched the man's actions in surprise. Watching Fong Mo kill the snake with one, Zhong Yuan concluded that this guy was definitely a professional. He saw his weapon that was similar to the one Lan Lan had used in her past life. It was an official equipment. Fong Mo contentedly told Zhong Yuan that he could see their difference in strength himself. Zhong Yuan realized that there was something wrong here. After all, an experienced warrior had come to fight monsters side by side with rookie students. The guy used his freezing ability on Fong Mo and he was now imprisoned in a huge block of ice. Zhong Yuan threw himself at the imprisoned guy to break the ice and thus injure him. The boy pounded the ice clot as hard as he could, but it wouldn't budge. Zhong Yuan couldn't understand why there was such a high density. His bones were about to turn to dust, and Fong Mo hadn't even been hit once. He decided to leave him here for the time being, because he didn't look like a villain, but he couldn't do anything else. Zhong Yuan picked up Feng Mo's tool from the ground and told him to sit there for a while he kindly used this knife. With one light blow he pierced the snake's head. This weapon was far better than his knife. As he left, he decided to gloat and allowed me to use his weapon, on the condition that he would be sure to return it later. Feng Mo stood in the middle of the forest lawn, imprisoned in a block of ice. Someone was shivering as they approached the tree house. It was Feng Mo, who was covered in abrasions. He walked while leaning on his wand and looked hatefully at the academy worker. The curator's partner asked Feng Mo if it was Feng Mo because the guy was in a very pitiful state. The guy laughed from the fact that someone had managed to beat up Feng Mo. The wounds were small but the humiliation was colossal. In addition, the academy worker noticed that the guy's weapon was also stolen. Feng Mo told the guy to heal him. The curator's partner used his healing ability. Ability returned to the sun. The target returns to the state it was in 24 hours ago. The academy employee asked him to tell him about his misfortunes, thus pleasing his soul. Feng Mo told him what had happened to him. The curator's partner asked him in surprise if it was true that one of the students had stolen his weapon. Feng Mo answered in the affirmative, but the curator's partner couldn't detect the clock signal. The guy said that currently the only disciple that wears a watch is Zhong Yuan, but his watch was taken away by Wang Meng. He asked if Feng Mo didn't get a glimpse of the person he fought with. The academy worker said that he should now focus on the initial task. Feng Mo asked if the guy could track down Zhong Yuan's whereabouts. The curator's partner answered in the affirmative, but asked him if the target wasn't snow snake crystals. Feng Mo said that it was all his target. Wang Meng desperately talked to himself about the fact that in the entire 2 days, he had not met a single living snake. Also lost, he began to think that he was cursed. Wang Meng ran into the sign again that there was no further passageway. It was strange that wherever he went, there were repairs everywhere. The guy rushed to look for another road. Feng Mo had been following him the whole time. Feng Mo stood with another road repair sign. He apologized to the one in his wake. After all, in order for him to have the opportunity to get more crystals, Wang Meng would have to wander around the forest longer. Feng Mo said that in any case, beginners like them didn't need these crystals anyway. Zhong Yuan, meanwhile, checked the map and looked for another snow snake crystal. He came to a place on the map, but the entire nest of snakes in that place had been exterminated. Zhong Yuan wondered what kind of livestock could have killed all those snakes. Zhong Yuan climbed a tree and saw a mountain. This mountain was not on the map that was given out at the academy. He was going to try his luck there. Zhong Yuan easily chopped another snow snake. Having gotten this far, a couple snakes he had found after all, and now he could improve his abilities once more. Perception range improved to 1 kilometer, freezing time increased to 2 minutes, with enough energy it can be used multiple times, so the time can be increased to hours. Due to my lack of feeling hungry, thirsty and tired, I got a little lost in time. It seemed it was time for him to go back. A huge snow snake crawled near his foot. His spear froze after a blue reptile crawled near its tip. She had an unusually huge muzzle compared to the other individuals of her species, and she hissed whistlingly. A huge snake coiled from above Zhong Yuan, who couldn't help but notice such a huge reptile. Zhong Yuan shouted to her, "Why is she hiding here?" The snake opened its mouth and threw itself at the guy. Zhong Yuan was surprised at this speed of the snow giant snake. Her mouth was already in front of his face. The snake gave a sudden strike with its tail, right on Zhong Yuan's abdomen. Zhong Yuan used his regeneration ability, which was very well pumped. The guy realized that he himself would definitely not be able to cope with such a giant. This serpent was stronger than all his kin. He didn't know if his new freeze would work on such a huge snow serpent, but there were no more options. Zhong Yuan thrust his hand forward and used the improved freezing ability on the serpent. The head and part of the monster's torso froze, contrary to Zhong Yuan's fears. Zhong Yuan couldn't believe his eyes. his ability had actually worked, but one had to try again to completely immobilize him. The guy quickly applied freeze for more times on different sides of the snow snake. Zhong Yuan struck the frozen snake with great force with his spear. Along with the ice, the tea snake cracked. This couldn't help but make Zhong Yuan happy. Guy rushed with renewed vigor to destroy the ice with the snake. He maimed it all over its torso and got to its head. The damage may not be high, but he could do some serious damage, because the weapon was excellent. After so many freezes he had used, his strength was pretty much running out. He had almost smashed his head in, so there was no need to worry about immunity to death. Zhong Yuan realized that the snake crystal was still intact and the immunity to death could work. The freshman mentor announced that there was still half an hour until the end of assembly. She asked all returning students to come to her for registration. Wang Meng stood and grabbed onto the tree. There was no way he could catch his breath. It was a miracle that he managed to get out. Feng Imo told him behind his back that he had successfully followed him from the mountain itself to make sure he reached the camp. An employee of the academy came up to them and said that Feng Imo had made a mistake again and the person he was accompanying was not Zhong Yuan at all. Feng scratched his chin and asked, wasn't this the person the coordinates were given by the curator's partner? The academy employee explained that the coordinates belonged to Zhong Yuan's watch, but as for why Zhong Yuan's watch was on another student was unknown. The curator's partner approached the frightened Wang Meng and motioned for the man to come with him. He decided to give him a chance to explain everything. The snow serpent was chopped into many pieces, but it was still trying to regenerate with its abilities. Zhong Yuan definitely understood that even though he was actually a corpse and very tired, but this thing was also working hard to recover. Finally, out of his last strength, he managed to reach the huge snow serpent crystal. The exhausted Zhong Yuan thought happily that it was finally over and the snake was dead. The clue appeared in front of him again, but now there was a new ability, Ice Blood Blast. During it, all abilities improved by 1200% for 30 seconds, but after using it, there was weakness for 48 minutes. What he read made him exhale in relief. He was lucky that the snake didn't have time to use this ability. Such power was definitely worth absorbing by Zhong Yuan. Wang Meng tearfully begged that he die here in peace and not be court-martialed. Feng Mo asked the academy worker if he had given Wang Meng's coordinates on purpose. He said that he was just providing the information he needed. Then Feng Mo accused him of the guy giving him the wrong coordinates. At the same time, Wang Meng was led away by the military, but he resisted in every possible way. He did not want to be court-martialed. The curator's partner asked if it was important what coordinates he gave, and afterward, he said that the only thing that mattered was that Zhong Yuan still hadn't shown up. It seemed that he had Feng Mo's weapon. The freshman curator looked questioningly at the guy who wasn't going to leave, that said to take the students to the academy and he would wait for Zhong Yuan. Afterwards they would return in Mr. Feng's car. Feng Mo said that it was already 10 and they should pack up, and afterward, he asked if the guy would just let them go back. The academy worker asked what was the big deal and if the guy wanted to have a showdown in front of the instructor. The assistant instructor said that he liked this guy, so don't let him go overboard in trying to get revenge, but Feng Mo replied that it was because of his ability that he was alive, so he wouldn't kill Zhong Yuan. He advised him not to train too much for now. The academy employee was doing work on his gadget, and Feng Mo was doing push-ups to make the waiting time worthwhile. 4 hours had already passed since then, but the guys hadn't changed their position and Feng Mo was still practicing. Evening came, the academy worker was now just sitting pensively, and Feng Mo was now carrying a barbell. Feng Mo tried to calm him down, but he refused to calm down and wanted to kill Zhong Yuan himself. Feng Mo asked him not to be nervous. After all, nerve cells don't regenerate, but he threatened to kill Zhong Yuan even if he died. Zhong Yuan approached the guys and was surprised that no one had come yet. He asked if it was too early. At that time, Zhong Yuan thought that he had really come very early and said that if he had known, he would have still walked around. Feng Mo's spear was in a terribly deplorable state as he had chopped the Snow Kite King with it. Feng Mo became very tense and asked what he could have done to his weapon that it was in such a bad condition. Zhong Yuan replied that he didn't do anything like that. After all, he deliberately didn't want to ruin the weapon. A slimy, magical shadow enveloped him and he couldn't move. The weapon was a very precious item to Feng Mo. He swung for a strike and shouted for the man to die. Zhong Yuan was exhausted and fell down from Feng Mo's powerful punch. The academy worker said that he had hit the guy too hard and should have gone lighter. After all, what would he do if the guy died? Feng Mo asked if the guy wasn't going to kill him himself. Zhong Yuan was exhausted and fell down from Feng Mo's powerful punch. The academy worker said that he had hit the guy too hard and should have gone lighter. After all, what would he do if the guy died? Feng Mo asked if the guy wasn't going to kill him himself. Zhong Yuan was thrown back as much as 10 meters. It seems this shadow has a range of action too. The guy thought that he should find a way to keep his distance from Feng Mo. At this time, the guys were talking about something. Then they approached and the academy worker said that Zhong Yuan was the reason why snakes had bitten his comrades and he had all the proof. Feng Mo started to play along and offered to tie him up. Zhong Yuan remembered that one of them was poaching during the exercise and the other didn't say a word to him. He concluded that they were conspiring and wanted to kill him. The guy decided not to wait for them to attack and took the safety off his gun. Zhong Yuan started shooting at Feng Mo and the academy worker, but their protective field didn't let the bullets through. Feng Mo told the guy to give up. After all, there was no way he could break through his defense, but Zhong Yuan wasn't going to give up. The curator's partner asked the one if he seriously thought they couldn't. Since Zhong Yuan had no place to go, Feng Mo wondered if the one had any trump cards up his sleeve. The academy worker decided to threaten Zhong Yuan's most precious possession. He said that after he died, Zhong Lan would fall to him. Zhong Yuan was like an electric shock. He immediately jumped up and had new strength to fight. The guy sent a pile of ice chunks at them as a warning and said if they touched his sister, he'd wipe them into powder. Feng Mo asked why he had said such a thing, because now they would be in trouble. Zhong Yuan decided to use Ice Snake Blast. His perception, freezing and regeneration abilities improved. Additionally, he gained the ability of Heat Shock, Ice Coating and Immortal Ghost. These improvements would only last for 30 seconds, but it didn't matter, he would take full advantage of that time. Zhong Yuan used the ice ability on the guys. They didn't have time to do anything. Feng Mo was, but it didn't transfer to the academy worker. Thanks to the protective field, he began to restore his partner's strength, with the help of abilities. The freshman curator's partner was astonished at such a guy's strength. If it wasn't for Feng Mo's defense, there wouldn't be a single bit left of them. The academy worker decided to use the Return to the Sun ability to unfreeze Feng Mo, but the ambient temperature was too low and everything froze in just seconds. Zhong Yuan realized that this skill required a lot of energy and he had lost almost all of his strength in a single use, therefore, it was impossible to procrastinate. After their defense field was destroyed, he grabbed the gun and pointed the muzzle directly at them. But the gun was covered in ice. It was over, the gun was frozen too and he couldn't pull the trigger. It looked like he had exhausted his luck, his body was half frostbitten. Zhong Yuan fell to the ground still saying that even if he died, he wouldn't let anything happen to his sister. Feng Mo couldn't believe that the enhancement could increase the damage by as much as 448, after all, anything above 448 was a kryptonite ability and Zhong Yuan had just exceeded that power. The academy worker asked if he could help him. But my partner, as soon as he got up, he fell right back down. The academy worker finally rose up, used the Return to the Sun ability on Zhong Yuan. He couldn't let him go so easily. After all, he still had plans for Zhong Yuan. Feng Imo told Feng Qing that he was a jerk and why couldn't he, don't go looking for an adventure in one place, because of him and he got involved in it. The action takes place in a hospital. There was a flat streak on the bedside screen, the doctors around him couldn't believe that he couldn't be saved anymore, his temperature dropped, his heartbeat and blood pressure were gone, that technique had ruined him. The doctors were about to send him to the morgue, but Feng Qing ran into the room and told those to stop. The doctors didn't recognize the guy without glasses. Feng Qing escorted the doctors out of the room and said that he was just in a state of anabiosis. Feng Imo asked if the latter was sure because he had noticed the cadaverous spots on Zhong Yuan. The latter wanted to take a look at where the latter had seen the cadaverous spots. Feng Qing once again used the return to the sun ability and contentedly said that everything was fine now and it was a couple of bruises. Feng Imo asked if he was telling the truth, but Feng Qing couldn't tell for sure if he was dead or alive. On Feng Qing's phone, there was a list of freshmen and Jin Yuan was signed with another made-up name. Feng Imo asked, "Isn't this ridiculous?" But Feng Qing said that Zhao Yuan had beaten the one twice. If his real name appears, they will not get into trouble. Feng Imo said that the one himself will tell why the one under a different name. Zhong Yuan, who was lying on the bed unconscious, now complained that it was very noisy. The guy lifted himself up and sat on the bed and shouted at Feng Imo and Feng Qing to shut up. Feng Qing was right that the guy was in anabiosis and Feng Imo gave him the money. Zhong Yuan didn't understand why they became so friendly. Zhong Yuan got a message from his sister who was worried about his brother. Zhong Lan told him that she was doing well in the academy and he cannot worry. Now the guy realized that he was unconscious for 2 days and he was miraculously not sent to the morgue. Feng Qing introduced himself and said that he was the president of the student union, and afterwards, he apologized to the guy, because he had said careless words about his sister. Feng Qing said that although they are strangers, but on behalf of the student union, he invites him to join them. Zhong Yuan asked him if they didn't know each other before. Zhong Yuan got up from the bed and punched Feng Qing in the jaw, sparing no effort. The boy sat on the floor in shock at Zhong Yuan's actions. Zhong Yuan then extended his hand in a friendly manner and said that they definitely knew each other now. Zhong Lan was sitting in the office near the freshman curator. Lin Dongliang was reassuring the girl, it was okay if she made a mistake. Lin Dongliang told her to just take the crystal in her hands and try to feel the energy contained within. The curator told the girl to try it. The probability of successfully absorbing a crystal is a bare statistic. In fact, it all depends on a person's talent and mental state. The curator mentally encouraged the girl. This world is full of monsters, only warriors can defeat them. Lon Lon knew that the reason why Uncle Lin is so kind to her and her brother is because he is counting on her. Zhong Lan wanted to protect the world and her brother. A clue appeared in front of her that she had opened a fire cloud in front of her. It would take 20 years of life to absorb. Jun Lan finally met her brother and jumped up happily. He had scared the hell out of her with his disappearance. Lon Lan noticed her brother's new uniform. Zhong Yuan revealed that he joined the student union and became a member of the disciplinary faculty. Zhong Yuan had heard from Feng Qing that there would be a week's vacation after the military training. He must have been put into this class for a reason. After all, Lon Lan had gotten in due to her talent, and they had definitely negotiated some conditions for him. Zhong Yuan asked if the instructor had done anything special for her while he was away. Zhong Lan hesitated and said there didn't seem to be anything like that, but Uncle Lin gave her a fire cloud crystal to absorb. This statement surprised Zhong Yuan. Lon Lan boasted that she was now the strongest warrior and would protect her brother. Zhong Yuan unhappily thought that even in this life, Lon Lan could not escape the fate of the team leader. All he can do is become stronger to protect her. The girl was naively offended and asked her brother why he didn't ask what ability she got. Zhong Yuan asked what ability she got. Zhong Lan replied, super speed and heavenly origin. Zhong Yuan turned his head for her to explain, but his sister was already a decent distance away from him. Jun Lan told him to watch what she was about to demonstrate to him and ran up to the statue. The girl snapped the huge statue in half with one swift kick of her foot. Lan Lan asked her brother if she was tough. Zhong Yuan said that she had gotten stronger, but it wouldn't save her from being liable for damaging public property. Zhong Lan had to write an explanatory letter for the mayhem she had caused to demonstrate strength. The freshman curator tiredly put her hand to her forehead and said it was fine, but asked her not to break anything else. The girl promised she wouldn't do it again and said goodbye. Zhong Yuan remarked that she didn't even need to pay and it was an overly generous gesture. But the curator stopped Zhong Yuan and said that he had performed well in the military training camp, and afterward suggested that he try to absorb the crystal with her help. Zhong Yuan thanked her for her kindness, but he didn't think he needed her help, and afterward was surprised that Feng didn't tell her anything. The girl put her hand over her face and sighed. She thought that even though he wasn't interested, there was no need to make it so obvious. But something distracted her from those thoughts. The guy was wearing a student council uniform, and Feng Qing was going to find a successor at the training camp. The curator wondered if he had chosen Zhong Yuan for this role,